Welcome to this course. We will be starting with Unit 1, Introduction to Macroeconomics. Now, what is macroeconomics? According to Shapiro, macroeconomics deals with the functioning of the economy as a whole. And simply stating, this is the essence of our subject also, that it is studied as a whole. Macroeconomics concerns with such variables as the aggregate volume of output of an economy, with the extent to which its resources are employed, with its size of national income, and with the general price level. Macroeconomics is concerned with the economy as a whole, so this you must always remember, it is considered as a whole or large segments of it. In macroeconomics, attention is focused on such problems as the level of unemployment, the rate of inflation, the nation's total output, and other matters of economy-wide significance. It studies the economic magnitude at the global level, such as employment, inflation, economic growth, are all matters of macroeconomics. The field covers these following theories: theory of money, international trade theory, distribution theory, economic development theory. Macroeconomics studies the individual variables and units. Microeconomics studies the individual variables, while macroeconomics includes it as a whole. Now, what is the background of macroeconomics? Macroeconomics first identifies these functions or these sectors of the economy. So, we have consumption, production, income and employment, and investment. In the upcoming units, when we talk about the circular flow of income or calculation of national income, we will be studying about all these in detail. But for now, we can understand that the consumers consume and that is called consumption. There is another sector which produces the output in the economy or the goods and services in the economy, and they are called the production sector. There is another sector through which the money is flowing through all these sectors is called the financial sector, and that is where people put in their money to invest it. Then the people who work in this production sector will earn some income and gain employment. That is this sector. So this is the background or all the sectors behind the macroeconomics. Now let's look at the key differences between microeconomics and macroeconomics. It is the study of economic actions of individuals and small group of individuals. So singular units. Macroeconomics takes the economy as a whole and not as a single unit. So it is studying the single units in a combination of each other. It is concerned with particular households, firm and industries, with particular households. Whereas macroeconomics is concerned with national income, general price level, national output, unemployment and poverty. The objective of studying microeconomics is that on the demand side, we want to maximize the utility, whereas on the supply side is to maximize the profit. On the macroeconomics end, the objective is to study full employment, the price stability, economic growth, and favorable balance of payments. Later on, when you will study the monetary policy and fiscal policy or any other thing about economic policy, you will understand that these are the major objectives of the economy as a whole, that we want to achieve full employment, we want to achieve price stability, economic growth, and a favorable balance of payments. The basis of study is that in macroeconomics, price mechanism which operates with the help of demand and supply. So here we operate with the help of demand and supply. At the same time, in macroeconomics, we operate with the help of aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and which helps us to determine the national income output and employment. Here we assume in microeconomics, we assume that the consumer is rational or the individual consumer, producer or households are rational and take their decisions accordingly. In macroeconomics, we assume that aggregate volume of output of an economy, the extent to which its resources are employed is given. Limitations is that in microeconomics, we assume that there is full employment. And in macroeconomics, involvement of fallacy of composition which doesn't prove true. When we further go ahead and read all the limitations, we will be covering this one in much more detail. Now there is a macro-micro paradox. Let's read about it. Individual producers at the micro level cannot control the price, but they are very vulnerable to the actions of producers in the aggregate or the micro level. So this is just talking about the independence of these two things. That microeconomics and macroeconomics, though being different branches of economics, but are interdependent on each other, that one affects the other. Never make a long-term commitment to an increase in the market price that is likely to be temporary. No marketing strategy is sufficient to overcome the problems that come from making long-term response to a short-term surge in prices. So they are both independent and dependent on each other, and that is the paradox. What is the scope of macroeconomics, or what kind of theories we will be studying in macroeconomics? So macroeconomics overall is the study of the overall economy, like the markets, business, consumers, and governments. We try to understand how all of these factors behave. So it is examining the economy-wide phenomena such as inflation, price level, rate of economic growth, national income, gross domestic product, and the changes in unemployment. Let's read some of these in further detail. Theory of national income, and all of these or some of these will be adhered to in proper units in the upcoming course of this chapter. Theory of national income. In macroeconomics, different concepts of national income, its different factors, methods to measure it, and social accountings are studied. So how we calculate national income, what are the different methods to do it, and what are the factors that accrue to it. Theory of employment. In macroeconomics, employment and unemployment are very basic problems that are always studied. Different factors that determine the level of employment as an effective demand, total supply, total investment, total savings, etc. are studied here. Theory of money, change in demand of money, supply of money, and there are many types of theories of money, different equations of money. So we will study all of these here. Theory of general price level, which is studying inflation, deflation, etc. Theory of economic growth, we try to study growth, development, the causes and the problems relating to it, and what policies are undertaken to improve it. Theory of international trade, how different countries trade with each other, what are the tariff policies, protection policies are also studied under macroeconomics. Some major macroeconomic issues are as follows. Economic growth. So the economy as a whole is always concerned about increasing this economic growth, reducing unemployment and reducing inflation. So these are our key features or key objectives of the economy. Growth and development. Growth and development are two important factors of microeconomics or macroeconomics. Now, what is growth? Growth is quantitative, whereas development is qualitative and quantitative both. Growth is also a part of development. Growth is basically just an increase in the output of a nation. Development is the overall development of a country, which is both quantitative and qualitative. Growth should be transformed into development. Its meaning is that the gap between the rich and the poor should be reduced in due course of time. In fact, the problem of growth and development has got much importance in recent past. Attainment of economic growth should not be done by downfall of environment and natural resources. So here comes in the concept of the sustainable development, that is consuming or producing today while keeping the resources for future as well. So that is all about growth and development. Employment. In the decade 1930, whole world was in the grip of Great Depression. Economic activities became very slow. The demand of goods and services had fallen. As a result, massive fall in commercial benefit, investment cut down at the large level, and there was high unemployment. If in the production field a large percentage of active population faces unemployment, then it becomes a problem whose solution at the whole economy level becomes very essential, because unemployment has a trickling effect. When people are unemployed, they are not able to fulfill their daily necessities, and it creates a lot of other problems in the economy as well. So this needs to be dealt. In India, unemployment is still a very big problem. Unskilled laborers are at great scale have suffered from rural unemployment. In urban areas too, skilled artisans found unemployment in our country. So there is a government has subjected to give reservation in government jobs. This has this we have been seeing this for a very long period of time. This reservation is trying to implement in private sector also. In fact, why reservation will be needed if all those who are ready to work on the given wages get the jobs created. Unemployment is not only a characteristic of our country, of developing countries like India. It is also a serious problem of developed countries like UK, USA, etc. In developed, underdeveloped, and developing countries, the only difference is the nature of the unemployment that there is. So, in our country, there is chronic or seasonal unemployment, whereas there are different types of unemployment, like cyclical unemployment in developed countries. A business cycle. What are business cycles? We know that our economy goes through ups and downs very regularly. As you can see, the economy is growing, it reaches a peak, then there's a recession, then there is a trough, and again it starts to grow, then reaches a peak, then there is recession. So these ups and downs in the economic cycle are called business cycles. So when the economic activities go down, then it is recession, and when it reaches its lowest point, it is called depression. When it improves, then it is called a stage of recovery. So suppose we are moving from here upwards, it is called a stage of recovery. And when it reaches its toppest peak, it is called a period of boom. So these are different stages in the business cycle, and the economy continuously adjusts according to them. Inflation. It is a condition where the general price level of the economy for a given period of time is continuously rising or is at a high. So what happens is, in that time, the value of money or people's purchasing power really goes down, and it creates a problem in the economy because people face it difficult to fulfill their requirements. Normal incremental price is helpful for economic growth, but excessive high is called inflation, where the economic activities are affected. Inflation sometimes takes the form of galloping inflation or hyperinflation. In the condition of hyperinflation, factors of production become very, very costly, especially investments. Interest rates go very high. As a result of this, cost of production increases and businesses' competitiveness is becoming less, especially in the world market. During inflation, it is the common man that suffers most. His purchasing power decreases, there is dissatisfaction towards the government, and there is social restlessness. So it is very important for the government to control this price, and that is the inflation policy. Budgetary deficit and fiscal policy. Now we have dedicated a complete unit to fiscal policy, and there you will understand it better. But what is a budget deficit? When the total revenue of the government is less than the total expenditure. That means we have created more expenditures and there is less revenue in correspondence to it. That means there is a budget deficit. A budget deficit may be used to finance an expansionary fiscal policy, which involves lowering income and corporate taxes and increasing government spending on infrastructure and investments to attract foreign capital and boost the economy. Interest rates and monetary policy. Now again, there is another unit which talks about monetary policy, and its interest rate is one of the tool of monetary policy. So, what is monetary policy? When the government acts or takes decisions to achieve some economic goals via the central bank, it is called the monetary policy. These are the certain tools like cash rate, interest rate, which affect the economic activity and then impact the inflation. Because controlling inflation is usually one of the targets of or objectives of the economy. Monetary policy influences interest rate in the economy, like interest rate for housing loans, business loans, and interest rates on savings accounts. Changes in interest rate influences people's decisions to invest or consume, which ultimately affects the economic growth, employment, and inflation. Macroeconomic targets and instruments. So there are some goals that the economy has, like say we want to lower the inflation, we want to lower unemployment, and we want to boost the economic growth. But there is a framework through which we are trying to achieve these goals, like aggregate demand supply, or the Keynesian model, or the non neoclassical model. And some policies are used, like monetary policy, fiscal policy, through this framework are used to achieve these goals. So macroeconomic policy problems is to choose appropriate values of policy instruments in order to achieve the best possible combination of outcomes or targets. So we have to use the best policies to achieve these goals or targets. That this is a continually changing problem because the targets are perpetually being affected by shocks from various parts of the world economy. Now these targets are constantly changing, and therefore we have to change our policy or augment it to change or to achieve these goals. There are some limitations of macroeconomics. As I have previously discussed, the fallacy of composition. Macroeconomics may be conclusion based on simple combinations of individual units. But those facts are logical and right for an individual. It is not necessary that those are right and logical for the whole economy as a whole. Because we are trying to combine individual units uh, and force or implement the same things learned there for the whole economy, and that may not be correct. Undoubtedly, saving is a virtue for an individual, but if all persons will have been saving, then total demand would be less. And so, no initiative for investment, and that would lead to a decrease in national income. So, this is saving when we talk about is a good virtue in a singular unit or for an individual consumer. It is taken as a positive thing. But if the entire economy were to save, it would reduce the initiative for investment and national income would fall. Finally, as a result of this, national savings would also decrease. This is the fallacy of composition. According to Professor Samuelson, excessive generalization tendency of macroeconomics due to this personal experience are applied to a whole economy, and this is not appropriate. Second limitation is heterogeneous units. In the study of aggregates, many heterogeneous units are included. These units are measured by different types. It is not possible to express these units in uniform numbers or homogeneous numbers. For example, 6 apples plus 7 apples is equal to 13 apples. This is a meaningful aggregate. 6 apples plus 7 oranges equal to 13 fruits. This is also a meaningful aggregate. But 6 apples plus 7 houses, this is something not of the same category, so this is not a meaningful aggregate. It is clear from the above example that generally heterogeneous units aggregates are vague. For heterogeneous units, rather we use money as a common denominator, but money value is not the true measure of its value in use. So in this case, we can use money to measure the aggregate. We can convert apples in money and houses in terms of money, and then we can bring it to a aggregate, or we can use any other unit which is common for both the things being measured. So because heterogeneous units are involved in the calculation of macroeconomics, it becomes difficult to calculate whatever you are trying to understand. Another limitation is the composition or structure of the aggregate, which is more important than the aggregate itself. So how we are making the composition or structure of the aggregate is more vital. In macroeconomics, aggregates are studied, but in fact, any system is affected by more composition of the aggregates or a structure than the aggregate itself. Suppose that in 2006 and 7 AD, price level was constant, but it does not mean completely that in 2007 there was no change in price. It is possible that in 2007 there is some decrease in prices and increase in the industrial goods cost. As a result, the general price level continued to be same. Therefore, to understand the problems properly, we need to study the structure of aggregate itself. But in macroeconomics, structural analysis of parameters are very rarely ever given importance. Fourth and last limitation is the diverse effects of aggregates. Another limitation of macroeconomics is that various sectors of economies do not study the various effects of an aggregate. Macro parameters do not give uniform effect on all sectors of the economy. For example, increment of price level has beneficial effects of businessmen and industrials, but wage earners suffer the loss. With this, we have come to the end of Unit 1 and we have understood what is macroeconomics, what is its scope, what all do we study in macroeconomics, and what are some of the limitations of studying this branch of economics. Thank you.